All right, we'll get started. Good morning, happy Friday. Any questions before I start with chapter 25? Looks like nothing on the chat yet. I've got one quick announcement. On Monday, we will not have in-person class. I will have the lecture posted on Moodle by Monday morning for sure. Hopefully I'll have it posted a little bit before that, but it will definitely be up there. So for those of you that want to tune in Monday morning, if that's what you're accustomed to, it will still be there. We will have lecture in person on Wednesday. I have a guest lecture that I have to give in it. Both classes are at 9 o'clock. So I figured I could make that work just by posting this one. So like I said, it will be there. Now there's a question. How's the exam going to be for the final, open book or closed book? It is closed book. It will be proctored, just like all of the other tests. I anticipate having it open the week that is whatever they want to call it for you guys when you're not here. And then I can't remember when it's scheduled to close. I want to say it's Tuesday of finals week. And so it will close then, but you will have multiple days where it will be available. All right. And I will, there's practice questions posted after chapter 26 PowerPoint on Moodle, whatever week that is, 2 weeks from now, I believe, is that for all of that material is posted. So there's summary, practice questions, those extra credit, multiple attempts are available. I recommend you look at that. There are numerous true false questions pulled out of each of the chapters. Hopefully, as you go through there, you'll see some of the ideas with these organisms, and I will get a study guide posted very soon. All right. Anything else? All right. It looks like we're good to go. All right. So shifting over to circulatory and lymphatic systems, there are numerous things as we move through here that we can think about. Some infections are very serious, things that we think of as causing tremendous mortality rates, thinking things like malaria that's plagued humanity since for forever, basically. And there are others that are like new or emerging that have the potential for other issues, definitely. So initially, starting off, we want to look at a different type of infection, a viral infection transmitted by mosquitoes, like malaria is. There are numerous infectious diseases that use some sort of arthropod vector, some sort of blood-sucking insect, as we see here. Mosquitoes are great at transmitting disease, and there are numerous species, and it just kind of depends on the type of mosquito as far as what potentials it might have at transmitting disease. So you don't need to get bogged down with that, but just bear in mind there's multiple types of mosquitoes. So these guys, the Aedes aegypti mosquito, have the potential, among other things, to transmit yellow fever. And it's a viral hemorrhagic disease. It's something that causes issues with the liver and causes damage and jaundice, as we can see with the whites of the eyes here, all yellow tinged. Multiple issues can result with this. Really, I kind of think as far as, not that I want to contract any sort of hemorrhagic fever, but I think yellow fever is maybe in the group of these hemorrhagic fevers, it's maybe a little more mild, if you will. So when we think about the circulatory and the lymphatic systems, we technically have looked a little bit about this as we were talking the immunology unit, and we were looking a little bit about the lymphatic system. I feel like some of this stuff we have at least thought the littlest bit about. So circulatory system, closed system with arteries and veins, capillaries, where ultimately the blood is providing oxygen to the tissues and then picking up CO2 in with all of these cells going through cellular respiration and dumping CO2, the blood picks that up and the cycle continues as it courses through the body, oxygenating that blood and sending it back to the tissues. So it's a network, a system that provides an opportunity for all sorts of potential pathogens to gain entry to the tissues, to move throughout the body, to cause systemic infections, or maybe we could say localized within the blood, but they still have the opportunity to migrate throughout. And an infection that stays within the circulatory system, we would think of some sort of septicemia, as these organisms are in there and replicating within the circulation. So, and septicemia, a broad umbrella category. It could be bacteria, and we'd call it bacteremia, fungi replicating within there, fungemia, or the virus, viremia, whatever. Multiple emias as they're in there replicating. This next image shows the lymphatic systems, all sorts of details with this, and we'll see an image in a second where we kind of merge them together, although it is sort of happening right up here. So the lymphatic system, we can see all of these channels, vessels that really kind of are superimposed or right alongside of the circulatory system as well, providing an opportunity for drainage, really, as we think about this. And it comes back, and ultimately the fluid cycles back through and makes its way back into the blood, into the circulatory system. Back up here. So this image is one I really wanted to look at for a second before we start talking details with the actual infectious agents. So this, I think, does a pretty good job of really kind of showing what's happening with the circulatory and the lymphatic system. They go together. It is super important when we think about these potentials, and there are some infections where we see issues or damage, blockages within the lymphatic channels that cause some serious concerns, some consequences with things like maybe elephantiasis, as we see these channels getting blocked or these vessels getting blocked. So you could see the arteries and the veins, the capillary bed, and the lymphatic system all kind of together. And with that, this lymphatic system is really kind of like the body's drainage system. It's like the storm drain where we're collecting runoff. That's kind of what I think of with the lymphatic system. There's all sorts of fluids, and this needs to be dealt with as the fluid, the plasma within the blood is cycling through, there are potentials where fluid moves out and becomes part of this interstitial fluid. It's not plasma really at this point, but it is components of that has migrated out. There are other things, immune cells, white blood cells, all sorts of different possibilities that potentially have moved out, and they can come back into these channels. There are other possibilities, as we're not looking at lymph nodes or any of that, but where we can see numerous types of immune cells for surveillance is occurring, looking at all sorts of potentials and possibly things that have made their way into this drainage system, if you will, where surveillance, where targeting of these foreign invaders can occur, and hopefully keep these pathogens in check. All right. So you could see the flow of blood moving through the circulatory system, and then the flow of lymph draining away. All right. And with that, it's both mechanisms causing this to move, but the lymph fluid is moving toward, from the extremities toward the heart as it's draining from the tissues. There's other components of the circulatory system, organs that help with this process. And the spleen, we can see right here, here's the diaphragm, the spleen, the liver, down below that. Within the spleen, it's a major lymphatic organ. If you're a little kid, it's essential and you need it. And if there's issues, damage, something like that, there's serious concerns. If you're an adult and you've got problems and wind up with the splenectomy, you're okay. All right. There are some issues, but it's not something that's truly life-threatening for you if it ultimately has to be removed, which I think is interesting in the first place. So we see it as an organ filtering blood. It helps to remove the old erythrocytes that live about 4 months, give or take a little bit, and they're constantly kind of being reproduced and removed from circulation. New ones showing up, old ones getting removed. It also provides an environment for numerous white cells to be available to do surveillance and hopefully to prevent organisms that have made their way into the circulatory system from truly taking hold and causing issues. All right. Next door, this next image is a lymph node. These nodes, and you've got numerous lymph nodes. The lymph fluid, get down to the bottom, comes in to the node, and through these afferent vessels, it makes its way in. As it gets in here, it has an opportunity to kind of slow down. It has the opportunity to kind of allow surveillance to occur. So it's not just moving right through. It allows the fluid to come in contact with numerous immune cells that have sequestered themselves away within these nodes, providing opportunities for their detection and removal. After a period of time kind of swirling around within the node, they move out through the efferent vessels and continue, making their way toward the heart and joining back into the circulatory system. At that point, the fluid within there becomes part of the plasma again, right? So this is cross-section of a heart. We're seeing some bacterial vegetations on some heart valve within here. This is bacterial endocarditis in the mitral valve. You can see what is this? The chordate tendineae, the heartstrings right within there, and this, well, again, cross section of the valve where it's colonized with bacteria. So this next image is gas gangrene, Clostridium perfringens. We mentioned that guy a little bit ago. So this patient with gangrene, you could see the discoloration and ultimately the organism spreading through. X-ray with this shows, and the gas gangrene. So as the Clostridium's in there replicating, it's producing gas, and there are numerous pockets that are forming within the tissues that are apparent with the X-ray. So kind of crazy. Yeah. It is treatable. Oftentimes, however, when we see issues like that, amputation is definitely something that they're considering. But you hope that you can get in and deal with that stuff. You can't. It's some serious antimicrobials, and probably getting in, like seeing that necrotizing fasciitis a few chapters back, where they're debriding the wound. Similar sorts of situations are going to happen. So this next one, this is something that we technically hear a little bit about this, usually summer months. There, just a couple of years back, there was an individual that contracted this. I want to say a farmer around Soda Springs area was where this happened. And rabbits are big culprits for this. They harbor Francisella and have the potential to transmit this. It is something that is very contagious. It is definitely of concern. Someone contracts this and they get quarantined in the hospital. Anybody that has come in contact with these people start a course of antibiotics because you just want to ensure that you don't get it as well. And you're looking at this guy's hand, you're like, well, it doesn't look like that big of a deal, right? So it is, and it is definitely something that can be a fatal infection. So here on the back of the hand, little skin lesion, it might be the result of that, hunting rabbits and maybe skinning the rabbit, where you get a cut potentially, and it inoculates the bacteria into the wound. There have been all sorts of potentials with this. There have been accounts where, out mowing the lawn, there have been, somebody on a riding lawnmower, there's maybe not noticing it, I don't know. Maybe they saw it and did not care. Mowed right over a dead rabbit and contracted Francisella, I'm assuming, as it aerosolized and they inhaled some of the bacteria. There are numerous potentials, right? And that's just kind of disturbing. I'd mow around that, right? Whatever. So here we could see a little bit of a lesion. As it gets in and starts to replicate and release toxins, that's where we truly see the serious consequences. And we'll see some details with this here in a minute. So coccobacilli with that, and again, it's highly contagious. It is a reportable disease, and it's also one that they are concerned of as a biowarfare agent. It's on a list of concerned organisms. So not something you just play with in a lab. All right. Yersinia pestis is the same sort of an idea, and definitely also cause for concerns when we think about some of these potentials. Yersinia pestis, the plague, bubonic plague, seems like maybe something that is a thing of the past, just something that is talked about or joked about if you've watched Monty Python. But it's still true. It still happens, all right? We see cases of it in the United States every year, typically summer months. It just kind of depends. There's cases in Idaho that get reported as well. Pretty rare, all right? And a lot of these things we think of kind of now more along here with the sylvatic rodent flea cycle, and it may not be like the, you know, the urban rodent flea with a rat, more like wild animals in, you know, Idaho. It's oftentimes, you know, some sort of camping situation, and it's squirrels or other things that potentially harbor the fleas, and the fleas are what's infected and transmit the disease, transmit the bacterium. So you can see in this figure, there's all sorts of possibilities, right? And different occurrences with this pneumonic transmission. So aerosolized droplets are a potential, and we can see this cycle, urban cycles, sylvatic cycles, and numerous possibilities as we see this. These blue arrows, birds and ships, have the potential, ships with rodents on there, birds infected through the consumption of some of these other rodents have the possibility, or just fleas from them, infecting them one way or the other, dependent upon the type of bird, right? Have the potential to transmit the infection over great distances, right? So it really kind of depends on the circumstances. Yersinia pestis is the bacterium. It's a gram-negative. It's actually kind of a little odd. We'll see an image of it in a second. It kind of has, what is it, bipolar staining. So it looks like the ends stain a little darker, little positive, and then pink in the middle. So I think they also describe it as a safety pin sort of appearance with the Yersinia. So little tidbit of information about this. The flea is what's transmitting it, right? And Yersinia pestis, as that flea feeds on an animal like a rat that's infected with the plague, with Yersinia pestis, the flea consumes some of that. The bacteria gets into the gut of the flea with that blood meal, and it replicates, it reproduces in the gut and causes blockages. So now this flea can't digest anymore, and feels as if it's starving to death, because deep down it really is, right? So the flea now, in starvation mode, is basically a feeding machine. It can't stop eating, basically, because it's starving to death. So it jumps from host to host, and as it tries to take a blood meal, basically every time it tries to feed, it regurgitates its blood meal back into the host, providing copious amounts of Yersinia pestis to get inoculated right into the wound, pretty much ensuring that whatever it hops onto to feed on, it's going to get infected. All right, that's pretty impressive, right? And the poor little flea ultimately winds up starving to death, even though it's constantly feeding. All right, that's pretty disturbing, I think. Kind of impressive. That little bacterium can do so much. So with that, there's a handful of different types of plague, different ways that it might manifest. We showed the pneumonic for just 1 second, all right? So oftentimes we think of it as bubonic plague. So Yersinia pestis getting into the circulatory system, making their way into the lymphatics and causing swelling. So here you can see this inguinal lymph node all swollen up. Sometimes they become very necrotic, almost like the toes over here. And so they get all black. right? Blackened necrotic lymph nodes, and they call it the Black Death, right? As a result of these buboes, right? If we make it into the circulatory system and start replicating within there, that's where we see septicemic plague. And in those circumstances here, with massive amounts of vascular damage, you've got, it looks like a super serious case of frostbite over here. This necrosis is a result of the basically tissue death from the bacteria that gets in there and causes all of the damage. You can't get adequate blood supply, and well, these toes will be removed. Crazy. Treatment with bubonic plague, pretty effective. As we make our way into septicemic or pneumonic forms, prognosis is very poor, even with treatment. There's definitely issues with that, right? And we'll see the littlest bit of that in a second. Oh, I see my chat blinking. Oh man, there are lots of bacterial diseases. Look at all those tables. That's what I'm recommending. And like I said, I will have a study guide that's posted here shortly. There are each chapter has numerous tables depending upon the type, bacterial, viral, or fungal, whatever we're talking about, with specific organisms and their respective diseases. That's a good starting point to think about this bacterium causes that disease. Highly likely there'll be a handful of matching questions where you need to think about some of that stuff. Some of the symptoms, possibilities as well, especially if they are, dramatically different from other types within that system. All right. So this blood smear, all of this kind of tan colored stuff here, these are all erythrocytes, red blood cells, all kind of stacked up or piled up on one another. Some white blood cells, neutrophils, and maybe some, I don't know, I don't know what these guys are up here. Possibly a basophil, but that seems kind of unlikely. So that matters not. What we want to look at are the bacteria, the little bipolar staining, safety pin sort of appearance with these guys. And it definitely sticks out as an oddity. Not doing boatloads of staining. If you were first thrown into the lab and stained that up, I think your first idea would be that you messed up your gram stain and you'd redo it. You'd redo it and get the same thing, and then you'd be like, wait a minute, what's going on here, right? And you'd probably redo it again, right? The third time, you're like, okay, something's up, right? It's interesting, right? So same idea, you're looking at things like maybe malaria. You're looking at a blood smear, especially if you're in Idaho, right? You're looking at this blood smear. People don't get malaria in Idaho. You get malaria if you've gone elsewhere, but not in Idaho. It's not something you typically expect to see as you're looking at a blood smear. And so you might stain it up again, redo it, see what's going on. Did I make a mistake? It's interesting. All right. Shifting over the littlest bit, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, named that because ultimately a lot of research was done up in Montana, Rocky Mountain Labs, National Lab, but really the prevalence is more southeastern US is where we see a lot more of it. Not that it's not around, but it's definitely more common elsewhere. Spotted fever, this is transmitted by a tick, and it is a spirochete that's causing this. Here we've got an individual's hand. This is a rash, petechial rash. And these guys start on the hands or wrists and then spread up to the trunk. And when we look at typhus, this infection's the opposite. You still see similar sort of rash-like appearance, but it's the opposite. And it starts off on the trunk and then moves out to the extremities. That's one potential way to kind of differentiate the littlest bit. There's still more details that I'm sure you'd need to employ to really look at that in greater detail. So with Lyme disease is another spirochete. This is Borrelia burgdorferi is the organism. In this case, it's another tick. Xyoides scapularis is the tick that transmits Lyme disease. And these guys are what we call deer ticks, commonly, all right? It's really pretty impressive, the life cycle of the tick. It takes a couple of years before you see the adult stage and egg production. And each, as we go through the larval stages with the tick, each stage of larval development requires a blood meal in order for that tick to grow, to molt, and to develop into the next stage. So multiple blood meals are needed, and it sets the stage as they are feeding to transmit the infection. With this, the ticks can ensure success because the mother transmits the bacterial infection within the eggs. So when these little nymphs, when they hatch out, the larval stages are already infected, all right? That's good news for the bacterium, right? Not so good news for anything that tick decides to feed upon. So we'll start here with in the spring with this little egg. This egg takes about a month of development into this larval stage. We get our little larvae that needs to feed, and it finds a mouse, typically. That's what they would like. And in both of these first circumstances, the mouse is what's preferred. The larva gets on there, and the tick needs an ample amount of blood. So it attaches and it feeds for a couple of days, all right? Gets a good full blood meal, detaches, and then basically it's good to go, all right? It overwinters, and then this next stage, this nymphal stage in the spring, finds a new host and feeds, all right? In this case, it feeds a couple more days, right? Attached to that host, gets a good blood meal. It molts into the adult stage of the tick, male or female. The male and female, typically these guys, the adult stage, find themselves on a deer, all right? That's what their preferred host would be, all right? Typically, all right? So they find their host, the deer, and on the deer, they find one another, all right? They pair up and mate and deposit the eggs. The female deposits the eggs a few weeks after all of this occurring, and shortly thereafter, they die, all right? The eggs, back to starting over, all right? Springtime, and there you go. So like I said, there's multiple opportunities we think about. Typically, it's at this point with the adult stage, but truly the larval stages, although rarely getting us, can still cause infection. But usually we think of the adult stage of the tick when it causes issues. And it's a similar idea, all right? That tick on us needs to be attached and get a good blood meal in order for the bacteria to be inoculated in, right? If it's on you and only on you for a short period of time, the likelihood of contracting this disease is very, very small, right? So if you go out into area where ticks are known to be, especially in areas where this is endemic, you want to be cautious. You want to wear long sleeves, pants. You want to check for ticks after you've been out and properly remove them. We've got a figure that shows that here in just 1 second. So there's a characteristic rash, but it's not always present, right? And that's a concern. I think it's maybe about 25% of the time observed, all right? That's not that common, truly, all right? But the rash, if it does appear, it's a super good indication that you've been infected with Borrelia, right? So it's this bullseye-shaped rash that results a few days after the bite from that tick has occurred. So here's a image of the Borrelia, these little spirochetes, little corkscrew guys, and ultimately the causative agent of Lyme disease. Willy Bergdorfer was the individual that was studying these guys. He was studying Rocky Mountain spotted fever up in Montana and had multiple other tick-borne illnesses that he was evaluating. Really kind of interesting. And there's all sorts of thoughts about Lyme disease and potentials with it, and as was it a possible consideration as a military biowarfare agent? Could it have been something like that? It's hard to say. All right. As we see this image, we've got a handful of red cells here. They actually look like red cells and not brown stacks of stuff. So some red cells, white blood cell over here, and then our little spirochetes, little corkscrews within there. So this is relapsing fever, different Borrelia spirochete. That's the, it's similar, it's cousin of Lyme disease, and another one that he was evaluating. So here's a tick, an adult tick, and then it's almost like a little spoon. It's a tick extractor. I'm sure every one of us carries one around in our pocket. You have this to help remove the tick. It's got a little notch in there, so you put it in around the mouth part, and then pull up. You can also use some forceps. There's all sorts of ideas with this that, burn it with a match, slather it up with some Vaseline, all sorts of things I have heard. Ultimately, trying to gently remove it is probably your best bet. You want to be cautious. You don't want to grab it and squish that tick and potentially inoculate yourself with lots of organisms. You don't want to break the mouth parts off and have them left within your skin. That can lend to infection as well. Not necessarily the bacteria that we're thinking about, other stuff that are potentially on it is a potential. All right, let me stop that. Let me see if I can get to this table potentially. We'll look through this real quickly. I think there's maybe 2 tables back to back on this. We're about at quitting time, so we'll go through this. I will leave you. There's a handful of organisms on here, a couple of them that we have not thought about, but we'll mention kind of in passing as we move through here. I know the text goes through some detail with a few of these. Anaplasmosis, this is the organism. This is another tick-borne illness, and not, you don't need to go through great detail with this. Not really mentioned. I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to test you on it. Brucellosis, Brucella, there are a handful of Brucella species that have serious concerns. So it can cause an undulating fever, kind of flu-like symptoms. It's kind of more livestock agricultural situation where you might be at greater likelihood of contracting this stuff in cattle. Brucella abortus is a leading cause of abortion. With a name like abortus, you ought to think so. It causes all sorts of other animal issues with big game animals, some of these others, with similar concerns, right? And a lot of this with the Brucella, there's issues around like Yellowstone Park with the bison as they try to come out of the park because ranchers are concerned that the bison harbor it and they're going to infect the cattle. Whether that's true or not, it's hard to say. It's definitely a potential, I suppose. All right. Cat scratch disease, Bartonella. Hensley is the organism. If I remember correctly, cat scratch used to be called Pasturella, but they put it in a different genus now. That's a tidbit of senseless information. This, with the name like cat scratch disease, should make sense that cats are the vectors for this. They harbor the bacteria. It may be inoculated into you through the scratch, a bite, because the saliva may harbor some of this as well. So either way could inoculate you with that. So there's numerous things that can occur: swelling of the lymph nodes, there's pain and fever. If you do get bitten or scratched by a cat, you want to make sure and clean the wound very quickly with warm soap and water to hopefully prevent it from causing issues in the first place. So immunocompetent, probably not a huge concern, and it will be a self-limiting disease. Ehrlichiosis, Ehrlichia, these cause some flu-like symptoms. This guy is transmitted through the bite of the Lone Star tick, and on the back of that tick, it's got a little dot that looks like a star. Lone Star tick, you also might assume you'd find them in Texas, and you do, but it's a dot on its back that gives it that name. I'm not 100% sure with this, but I think it is the Lone Star tick. And it's not a bacterial infection if I remember correctly. I think it's something within the saliva of the tick itself. And like I said, I'm not 100%. I'm pretty sure it's the Lone Star tick. There is a situation that occurs in people when they are bitten by a specific type of tick. Like I said, I think the Lone Star. As it bites you and inoculates you with some of the, I think it's the saliva again, it establishes a response within us that if you weren't vegetarian, you now are. It makes you allergic to animal protein, which is crazy, all right? Everything except for primate, all right? Because it does not make you allergic to yourself, all right? And I guess deep down, if you really just have to be a carnivore, you could probably dine on some monkeys and you'd be okay, right? But, or turn into a cannibal, right? You'd be all right. But otherwise, steak and chicken and whatever else, it's not on the menu anymore, right? Because eating any of that, you have a severe allergic reaction. Crazy. And you don't get rid of it. That's odd, right? Stinking ticks. All right. Endocarditis and pericarditis. There's handfuls of organisms that can cause issues within the heart. Staphylococcus, I don't know what we've got here. We've got kind of a typo, multiple staphylococci species, streptococcus and enterococcus, all possibilities with this, and issues as they get in and colonize numerous antibacterials. You don't need to really focus on treatments with these things. The epidemic typhus, Rickettsia prawazacii, these use a lice back to transmit the bacteria, the rickettsial organisms, into us. So numerous rodents, rats, serving as reservoirs, and then the louse feeding on them and maybe feeding on us. So that's epidemic typhus. There's a couple of different types of typhus. The gangrene, Clostridium perfringens. There's some other Clostridia that can do that as well, but perfringens is one of the main culprits with it. And we saw an image with that individual up on their arm. So rapidly spreading necrotic tissue and possibly treated with some antimicrobials. Septic arthritis. This is infectious arthritis. Staph aureus or Neisseria are potential culprits to cause issues with that. The Lyme disease, we saw it, Borrelia burgdorferi, and possible symptoms with that, the rash and other issues. There are numerous concerns with Lyme disease where they think maybe it's possibly undiagnosed and allows it to progress, or possibly inadequate treatment that allows for more of a prolonged type of infection, where it causes serious issues later on and possibly very debilitating, maybe even fatal infections with that. So really depends. The murine or endemic typhus, it's a different rickettsia, so Rickettsia typhi instead of prawazacii. So this rickettsia, little bit different, low-grade fever, there's rash, headache, and cough. And in this case, instead of lice, it's fleas. So different little blood sucker that's feeding on you, but both types of typhus, right? Osteomyelitis, some staph and strep with some potentials with that as they get into the bone and cause issues with that. Moving down, a couple more on here. Yersinia pestis with the plague, numerous different potentials with it, the bubonic form, and like we said, it could be septic or pneumonic as well with that. So fleas serving as vectors to transmit from numerous rodents. Puerperal sepsis, Streptococcus pyogenes, and a handful of others can cause this. Fever, shock, and death. We think about these organisms getting inoculated in the process of childbirth as a potential. This I want to say is what they described as childbed fever way back in the day. I don't think it was pyogenes. I think it was Streptococcus algalactiae. So it says here many others. That was one of those culprits. So there's other possibilities, however, it doesn't have to just be, hatching out into the world. Rat bite fever, not probably as common as it used to be, or dependent upon where you're at. If you go to some other areas, there's definitely concerns. Streptococcus or Streptobacillus moniliformis and a Spirillum minor, and this kind of different geographic locations as far as where you might be seeing these guys. So the rat biting will inoculate, or exposure to the feces or urine can also cause issues that way. Okay, real quickly, we'll just mention these. The relapsing fever, different Borrelia, rheumatic fever with Streptococcus pyogenes, as this ultimately is a consequence of strep throat, where it comes in and causes issues. The spotted fever, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, is Rickettsia rickettsii. I maybe said that was a Borrelia before. It's not, it's Rickettsia. But Willie Bergdorfer was studying those guys. Toxic shock from staph. There's definitely issues where this was really kind of big concerns with tampons and other intravaginal products. But there was one brand way back, it was maybe 60s or 70s, that touted prolonged use. Put one in and leave it in all day long, and you're good to go. There's numerous consequences with that, and Staph aureus potentially colonizing and causing serious issues. The toxic shock can be fatal really pretty rapidly. Some strep can cause toxic shock-like issues, similar circumstances. Trench fever, this was recognized way back in the day in World War I. Bartonella quintata, and it's another one that's transmitted by the body louse. So human to human contact, transmission of the lice lends to these issues, and close quarters like that set the stage for it to move very rapidly through the military. And we almost started this morning with Talluremia, rabbit fever, Francisella. So eating or handling infected rabbit has the potential to transmit that. All right, that's the end of that. I went a couple of minutes over. I apologize. Have a good weekend, guys. Like I said, no in-person lecture Monday. I will have the video posted, second part of this chapter. All right, have a good weekend. See you all Wednesday.